Angelique Anonymous. You've probably had a ton of feedback on this, but I would like to hear more about your thoughts about Tom Cruise's supposedly leaked audio where he berated some of the film crew of his Mission Impossible 7 movie. A lot of the public who are not aware of his narcissistic tendencies have applauded his threats and actions as taking a hard stance on COVID precautions, which is understandable if they are not aware of his close relationship to David Miscavige. I've also seen from quite a few ex-Scientologists that his tone 40, quote-unquote, and delivery, shouting, and threats of termination were pretty much what would encompass a Miscavige-style rant to Sea Org members. Today, there are reports that at least 5 of the crew members have quit as a result of this leaked rant being made public. Do you think that the audio was intended for the public to hear, to paint Cruise in a favorable light of being a tough leader and concerned for the health of the crew? It seemed to me like it was more for the benefit of his own production company and future career. Also, do you think the crew left of their own volition? I know he is surrounded 24/7 by Scientologists, so were the crew members of the church? Or were they heavily investigated and vetted before being hired to work in such close proximity to Cruise? Could they have been put through some sort of unofficial light auditing by Cruise's staff to see about their possible PTSdness? If they quit on their own, could they have been encouraged, quote-unquote, to leave by Cruise's people if the church felt that they would speak out, or would they have to sign more NDAs on the way out? I have so many questions about this situation just because I imagine that with COVID precautions on top of lockdowns, quarantines, and the general tightness of film production, that this situation could even be leaked out in the first place. Okay, thanks for your question. And we did discuss this a little bit on the Critical Conversation show that we did this Friday night, so you guys can also check that out. And I will encourage you to please check out my call-in show that my wife, Melissa, and I do every Friday here. All right, enough with all the, the plugs here. So, okay, Tom Cruise leaked audio. Yeah, so apparently there have actually been 2 incidents of this, because when I looked this up today, the Sun is further reporting that there was another eruption followed on Tuesday night as the news of his original rant emerged. A source said, quote, "The first outburst was big, but things haven't calmed since. Tension has been building for months, and this was the final straw. Since it became public, there has been more anger, and several staff have walked. But Tom just can't take any more after all the lengths they have gone to just to keep filming at all. He's upset others aren't taking it as seriously as him. In the end, he's the one who carries the can." All right. So that was the extent of the quote from whatever source they have on set. Okay, so first off, it didn't surprise me at all that that kind of a rant could have leaked off a set and been uploaded to the internet. Anyone who was standing around there could have turned their phone on, clicked record, and once he was going on a roll there, and I believe that such a person would be motivated to do that because this wouldn't have been the first time that there would have been such behavior by Tom Cruise. And they probably would have been, okay, something needs to be done about this. Let's get this recorded and get this out. That's one way I could see how it could have been easily leaked from the set. These are not closed sets where everybody's phones are being taken and things like that. At least as far as I know, they're not. Yes, there are NDAs and things that you sign, and I'm quite sure that Tom and his production company are quite on top of that. But if they can't find the person who did it, then, you know, those NDAs are so much worthless paper. The 5 people walking apparently is in response to some of this tension and upset that Tom has been creating on the set. Now, this comes from, of course, a valid concern about the safety and lives of the crew and the people involved, because COVID is real and the vaccines are not yet being distributed there on the set, and they are shooting in Italy and other places around in Europe. And they have had, and I'm sure they and every Hollywood production has had a real hard time trying to keep operating at all. It is really, really difficult. And of course, it should be difficult because they are right up against the edge of every regulation and control we would want to put in place in order to keep people away from each other so they don't spread the stupid virus. And apparently the pressure to get this done and enforce compliance and make this happen and make the set a safe place and still get the movie shot has been a months-long problem. There was a report also in here that months ago there were crew who were coming down with COVID, and Cruise had to hold an emergency meeting with director Christopher McGuire about that to sort out what are we going to do about this, because they can't just have people getting sick and dying on the, when they're trying to just make a movie. So I get the pressure and the real world concerns and the real world problems of this situation. And so it's not that it's a nothing burger or there's nothing going on or Tom is just overreacting, because, it's valid. Now, that being said, in terms of the subject matter of the problem being valid, was Tom's reaction to it valid? Well, clearly no. No one as a grown-ass adult needs to be talked to the way that Tom Cruise was ranting and screaming at these people and threatening them and threatening their jobs. And yet that's Tom Cruise. So now I want to stress here the thing that I'm seeing in the reports, which no one else is really talking about. And I'm a little surprised, although it would take and maybe a few more days of some investigations or reporting on this. But I believe that we would find a repeating pattern of similar behavior. And I think that's what prompted people to leave. Anybody can excuse or apologize for or forgive a one-off on the part of anybody else. I mean, we're very forgiving as a species, and it's okay to do that because we can all lose our shit from time to time, and we actually should be granted a little bit of latitude to be able to do that, because we are all imperfect creatures at best, and the pressures and vagaries of life can be very, very overwhelming. So I understand anyone having a bad day, taking it out on other people, being upset. But I also would expect that, grown-ass adults who have childish temper tantrums like that would come back and do the mature thing and apologize and make up for what they did. And I don't, particularly see any evidence Cruise did that. And the reports are that he's not, that things are, just continuing to be very, very tense. I believe that a lot of that tension comes from the fact that that was not a purposeful leak, that Tom Cruise did not want that information out, that he was acting that way on set. I think it's embarrassing to him, and I think he's now got a PR problem he has to deal with. There are a ton of Tom apologists and fans who will say and do anything for him because they like his movies. It's weird, but it's true. People will forgive anything if they, if you entertain them. It's actually a little sad as far as I'm concerned, but that is the truth. So you have a whole contingent of people who are just giving Tom a pass on this. Well, of course they can, because they're not the people who have to work for him, And if you, are on the set there and you have to work for the guy, then it sucks. I listened to that many times. I've listened to this recording now, and it sounds exactly like the way we would be talked to in the Sea Org. I mean, it's almost word for word. And that's a light rant, by the way. There were much, much, much more intense rants with the potential of physical repercussions. I was called one time. One time I was assaulted, by a female executive, Jenny DeVock, and another time I was almost. I mean, I was really in fear. There was the Sea Org missionaire from the base who had come into PAC, same time Jenny DeVock did actually, and he called me over and he was furious. I mean, he was almost shaking. He was so mad. And he was freaking me out. And he's like, get over here. And he made me stand within inches of his face while he laid into, my face and gave me the what for being invisible and not being around and not doing my job, etc. All just much nonsense. But that's what they do when they are giving you what's called a face ripping or a severe reality adjustment. These are terms in Scientology, in the Sea Org specifically, for what you get in SRA when you need to have your head adjusted, right? And this goes back, and I've mentioned this before in the distant past, I think, on some question on this show, but let me say again that this goes back to a Hubbard policy on how to deal with people as an executive of a Scientology organization. This policy covers the fact that people have reactive minds. They have these parts of their mind that are stimulus response, that feed them commands based on situational factors that, that reproduce earlier situational factors where you were in a bad way, right? You get bit by a dog years ago. It was very painful, all that. I've explained that so many times, I'm not going to explain it again. But because we have these reactive minds, Hubbard says, they impinge on a person. The reactive mind, as a subconscious mind, is exerting pressure and control on your body, on you, on your Thetan, on you as a spiritual entity, right? And you, in response to that, not knowing, being ignorant or unaware of the very existence of the reactive mind, you think it's you. You think you're doing these crazy stimulus response, acting out kind of things that don't really make a lot of sense, are not very logical, like ranting or screaming, but in this case, like violating COVID regulations. Okay, let's look at this from Tom Cruise's point of view. He's in charge of this thing. He has spent millions of dollars on this project. He has spent countless hours trying to figure out how to keep the crew safe and comply with all these regulations. And then here are a couple people. Apparently what set him off was a couple people standing too close to one another while watching a playback or something from a scene. So they were just not they were not close enough together, and maybe there was a mask problem. I couldn't quite tell from that. So his response to that is, well, here are a couple people who are so out of present time, who are so not paying attention, who are so impinged on by their reactive mind to act in a slack, non-regulatory, out ethics manner. This is how Cruise would be thinking about this, that, using the Scientologies, right, the Scientology language, that he felt that he had to go and impinge on them harder than their reactive mind is impinging on them. Okay, that's the Hubbard policy, is you have to create a thing that is too gruesome to confront. So the punishment, right, the repercussions, the consequences of your actions have to be so gruesome that you would not even contemplate allowing that to happen again. So this is where punishments like going and scrubbing toilets with toothbrushes, or cleaning the galley, or scrubbing dishes until 4 a.m, or cleaning out trash cans, or getting thrown overboard, or the endless litany of punishments that the Scientology can inflict on its members, especially again in the Sea Org. So Cruise is applying that policy of, I need to impinge on you harder than your reactive mind is impinging on you, and get you to snap into present time and realize, hey, you're fucking up, you need to knock it off. And from here on out, keep yourself in such a state of mindfulness and readiness that because it's too gruesome to consider the alternative, right? Like getting fired would be too gruesome. That would be an example of that. Or again, physical or emotional punishments, psychological punishments. So that's the attitude that Cruise comes at this with, okay, is that people have to be impinged upon. And I don't particularly agree that that's the way that you should deal with subordinates. I've been an executive in and out of Scientology. I've run people. And I have always had much more positive results by appealing to people's humanity and intelligence. But there are times when people fuck up. And when they do, you have to, kind of make sure that they understand that what they did was wrong. Cruise went too far, of course, in his rants. And you can see there's a lot of pressure on his head about this, and he's not taking it well. And I think that's really what this sort of indicates. Now, when it comes to you throughout your question, you were asking about the church's influence in this. And I am not in a position to be able to clearly and knowledgeably tell you where the church's influence ends, and Tom Cruise's, and the production companies and the insurance companies and all the other things that are involved in a Hollywood production, where that comes into play. I don't think the church is running the Mission Impossible productions. I think Tom Cruise is. I don't think the church is interested in running Tom's movie productions, but I do think that the church is interested in Tom and in what Tom can provide for the church in terms of money, in terms of new members, in terms of publicity. And of course, this is going to reflect negatively. And there's already thousands and thousands of comments all over social media about Tom and the Scientology connection with this. So this was there. There is no world where I believe that this was purposefully leaked. And because Tom and the church are way, way too sensitive to negative PR. And Tom would never put something out knowingly that would create a knowing possibility of a bad image for him. He is someone who controls his stage presence or stage presentation. What you see, his public image, is incredibly controlled. So this was out of control and not something that he wanted to have happen. But I can't really speak too much to the church's influence other than to say this much with certainty. The church is very interested in Tom, very interested in what he is doing, and they will, get themselves involved. I'm sure he has assistants, production assistants, or personal assistants, or crew who are Scientologists, no question about it. But he can't staff an entire set with Scientologists. There aren't enough of them, and they aren't well enough trained in the cinematic arts, right? So he's going to have to, and of course there's union and there's this and there's that, and that's why I know the church is not too heavily involved in that, because there's all kinds of mechanisms in place in Hollywood to very tightly control, unless you're doing indie productions, who gets to work on the set, who gets to come on the set, how long they have to be there, how much they're going to get paid, how many hours of the day they work, what are all the regulatory concerns with the COVID and any other safety issues, OSHA standards, et cetera. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of bureaucracy, paperwork, and complication involved in making any movie. And I'm just trying to get that across because I don't think people think about that too much. We are talking about hundreds of people involved in this production, maybe thousands when you get into all the digital effects and stuff. So plus all the marketing and all that other stuff. But in terms of what Tom's dealing with right now, it's a few, it's a lot of people, and they're not all Scientologists. They're not all controlled by Scientology. They can't all be vetted by Scientology. But I do imagine that as the executive producer, Cruise has quite a bit of latitude in terms of hiring, firing, and control of the production. And he's the one, of course, who would set the tone for the whole production. I want to also kind of point out, just as another little thing here to talk about, Cruise is 59 years old, okay, or 58 years old. I guess he's 7 years older than I am. He is running this production, and this production is Mission Impossible 7. I mean, this guy's career is over. I mean, all he's doing is he's stuck in this endless loop of Mission Impossible movies, and I don't know what else he's doing, So I know he gives to charities. I know there are good things that Tom Cruise's name is attached to, but, what we're seeing here is not just pressure from the COVID situation, but I believe we are also seeing pressure from the fact that Tom is slipping into irrelevance. And he is working his ass off to try to avoid that by trying to shoot movies up in space, by trying to make this production happen. And then, of course, taking all the credit in a public forum, because this is how he's going to act. Just like Trump, he's a narcissist, and he's going to act that way. So it's always going to be about him. And even in his rants and raves, he talks about how he's on the phone with the heads of all these production companies. He's really big on name dropping. I don't know if you noticed that about Tom Cruise, but he's really big on puffing up his importance by telling you all the other really important people he's talking to, right? He did the same thing when he got that IAS Freedom Medal of Valor back in 2004, where remember that turtleneck video? And remember, that's also Tom Cruise in reality. That's the real guy, right? He's nuts. And when he went up on stage to get that award, he said to all these Scientologists, I have talked to all the leaders of the planet Earth. I have talked to all of them, the leaders of the leaders. And we got David Miscavige, and he's better than all of them. He's the best. He's a leader of leaders, And you're just like, dude, So he's always like, kind of showing off by comparison, I guess you could say. And I don't know, I kind of find that a little bit annoying. So that's my rant about Tom Cruise's rant, and I hope that was somewhat interesting and gave you some information about the Scientology connections.